Hi, this is Nat, and today I'm talking about games and sex. First off, I've tried to be fair about the selection of games I mentioned during this video, picking games which for the most part I otherwise enjoyed, and staying away from soft targets like Custer's Revenge, and from overly used examples, so no Grand Theft Auto. And I'll not be talking about adult interactive fiction, nor games which primarily focused on sex either. I want to critically discuss sex as a narrative construct in mainstream gaming content, and I hope I do the topic justice. I think games as a medium have hit whatever the equivalent of late teens is for media forms. The industry has grown hair where there was no hair before. It has delusions of grandeur and acne. Things have changed. There are feelings that weren't there before, and games are looking for release. Whether we are pursuing slinky aliens, raising a knowing eyebrow to a foxy elf, or dead-eyed, awkward dry humping in a garage, some games are determined to include sexual content as part of their overall package. We've all encountered the awful minigames, the ones where we have to press a certain combination of buttons to achieve climax, just like real sex, or the times when it is implemented as a series of fetch quests in order to garner romance points, before being rewarded with a scene implying coitus. Both of these bother me. I see sex differently than games do. I understand sex as both simple and complex. I understand it as both intimate and self-gratifying. There are kinds of sex, all different flavours, and when it is introduced as a mechanic restricted only to one interpretation, that disconnects me from the role I was till that point playing. I take particular issue when it is incentivised, beyond being part of a relationship or interaction with another character. In-game bonuses, or achievements rewarded for sex, just seems wrong to me. They only serve to farther distance me from my character. I'm generally a bit uncomfortable with sex in narratives. I have a personal test of sorts when I encounter it. My test for it takes the form of a two-part question. Does it contribute to the plot? And is it necessary? Now, I don't have a problem when a game's sex content can answer yes to these questions, but the problem is when they can't, and games don't pass my test often enough. In a section of Witcher 2 while trapped, Geralt may seduce and have his silver-haired way with Triss, because when trapped, what could be better than a skinny-dipping screw? And recently CD Projekt Red announced that The Witcher 3 has had 16 hours of motion capture recorded specifically for use in the game's sex scenes. Obviously, this does not mean 16 hours of sex in the game, and only refers to the amount of material they had to create whatever scenes go into the final product. But we do know that it begins with a sex scene. This, according to senior designer Damien Monnier, is to establish that Geralt's partner is at least someone he enjoys the company of, and would pursue if she was to go missing. This sounds a bit strange to me. There are other ways to establish motivations than through intercourse. For instance, compelling dialogue and emotive connections. Shadow of the Colossus is able to convey to us how much mono means to Wander, and can do this without either sex or dialogue in its opening cutscene. We witness how far Wander travels. We see a grand and intimidating temple, the desolate and quiet lands, the music, and the way that Wander tenderly lays mono on an altar. So I have to believe that it is possible for games to create connections between their characters, which don't rely on being condensed into simplistic notions of, you must care, see, you're having sex. But The Witcher 3 isn't out, so I'm not judging the game, which I have to say I can't wait to play. Instead, I'm only looking at this one aspect we know about it, as one representative of an overall problem with sex in video game storytelling. That said, if we look at the sex in Witcher 2, then my hopes for the nature of this content is not so high. Does it contribute to the plot? Not really. Is it necessary? Absolutely not. Of course, this problem is in no way unique to games. For years, the world of film has had the problem of obligatory sex scenes, where the characters have to do the deed, so the audience can understand that there is a relationship between these characters. In the world of literature, the Bad Sex in Fiction Award is an award of sorts for novels with excruciatingly awful sex scenes. But this is a show about games, so that is where my focus is. I just think it's important to recognise that this is not a game-centric issue. More so, it is an issue of narrative ability. If sex is used as a shorthand to indicate that we should care about a character, then that's a problem. Maybe make me care about the character in some other more meaningful fashion. If sex is used by the game in an attempt to demonstrate a certain character trait, such as an insatiable lusty appetite, again, it is somewhat problematic. Without the connective tissue of dialogue to establish this trait, I would never have known. And if the dialogue is where I'm getting my explanation from, then what use was the sex scene in the first place? I have been wondering if perhaps it is an ability to relate to certain events that makes us judge them more harshly. I don't have a problem with flashbanging and then gunning down the opposition. I never find it weird that I can be a giant mech, or have bother getting on board with vampires and werewolves, because I'm not these things. I have no point of reference. I never found the idea of Resident Evil's outbreak and its assorted monstrosities odd, but it was the dialogue that was chafing. Perhaps it is the same with sex. I know what is supposed to be going on, and it falls into the uncanny valley because of it. I don't see intimacy. I see two plastic-skinned, dead-eyed puppets rubbing against each other, and that's what makes it most unsettling. Could it be the rising average age of gamers as well? Has the audience matured before the medium did? As the average age of gamers rises, and the general demographic of those playing games expands, perhaps the industry hasn't managed to keep pace. It would not be surprising for this industry, which is so focused on the new games, new machines, new graphics engines, to be one which tends to embrace change slowly. Innovations are treated with caution, so maybe we shouldn't be surprised at how narrative ability lags behind technical know-how. We are only now entering an age when attention to a game's narrative is the rule, not the exception. Storytelling is something that most developers are only now learning. They look to the older media of cinema and television in a bid to duplicate their successes, but doing so may restrict them to their failures too. Sex in games does not justify them being part of a mature medium. That maturity will come when games handle diverse and interesting topics well, not just by saying, look at all the boobs and butts. We must be mature. We've got nudity. It's no more representative of maturity than using violence or swear words. At the end of Far Cry 3, you are offered the option to continue with what had been your main motivation during the game and rescue your friends, or to betray them and have a fatal encounter with the psychotic Citra, who, having been impregnated, immediately murders you. Firstly, I must admit I'm amazed at her certainty at being pregnant, but therein lies the problem with this particular scene, as the sex is but a brief endgame reward before you are stabbed in the chest and Citra sarcastically congratulates you, declaring, "You won." It may fit a good ending, bad ending dichotomy, but the actual sex is clumsy and looks unfamiliar as an act of intercourse. I always have to question sex scenes in games, because generally they're cutscenes. They are often just another time I am sat with a game where my input isn't required. I'm rarely a fan of cutscenes in general, as I mentioned in part 1 of my problems with games, but unnecessary sex scenes and minigames. There's a special place in my video game hell set aside for such things. If it fails my test, then the awkward 2 minutes wasted with sad puppets flopping about seems to me like 2 minutes of game that I could have been playing, or 2 minutes that could have been used to devise a more meaningful connection between these characters, or 2 minutes where actual plot or exposition would have been a better fit. Then we have the obvious problem of gender imbalance, and the problem of representation of player sexual preferences, and the problem of tying together both diversity and storytelling comfortably. But I'm out of time, and I'm not going to be covering those issues, in this video at least. We are Dinoslippers USB. If you like this video, then maybe give us a wholly platonic like below. And if there's anything you want to talk about with sex in games, put it in the comments below. And if you really like this video, then click subscribe and check out our other videos.